The Crimson Horizon. The legend of Captain Dorian Black. The sea has always belonged to legends. Some whispered in taverns over mugs of rum. Some carved in maps that lead to places no soul should dare follow. But every so often, a story rises that cuts through the fog and sails beyond all others. This is one such tale. It begins not with a king or a navy admiral, but with a man who chose the black flag when the world gave him no other. His name was Dorian Black. Once a thief, a rogue, a nobody cast out to the tides until fate bound his name to storms, treasure, and fire. Through battles against empires, duels with rival captains, and voyages to waters unmarked on any chart, he became more than a pirate. He became a legend. The Crimson Horizon is not just a story of the sea. It is the sound of cannon fire across endless waves, the cry of gulls over blood-red sunsets, and the weight of freedom wrestled from the jaws of kings. This is the saga of a man who lived by no law but his own, and carved his place in eternity with cutlass and sail. You are about to hear the legend of Captain Dorian Black, the pirate who defied the world. The Crimson Horizon. The legend of Captain Dorian Black. Chapter 1. Fire on the Waves. The night burned red. The galleon King's Valor, 3 decks high, bristling with guns and pride of the Royal Navy, was aflame from bow to stern. Her sails sagged like torn parchment, catching sparks that bled down into the rigging. Men screamed over the roar of cannon fire, and the sea's violent song, some falling with shot through the chest, others tumbling into the black, unforgiving deep. And through it all, a single ship carved circles around her prey, like a shark toying with a whale. Black sails snapped in the wind, stitched with a skull and crimson horizon. Her decks thundered with iron, belching smoke and fire. Her crew roared like devils freed from hell itself. The ship was the Eclipse, and at her helm stood the man who would become a legend, Captain Dorian Black. He was broad of shoulder, clad in a weather-beaten coat that had once been navy blue, but was now blackened with powder, salt, and blood. A tricorn hat shadowed a face that was half scarred, half carved into a grin of pure defiance. An eye patch crossed his right eye, and his left gleamed like a coin in torchlight, hungry, merciless, alive. "Portside guns fire," he bellowed, voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The Eclipse lurched, her crew yanking ropes and lighting fuses. A moment later, a broadside erupted with the thunder of death. Iron slammed into the Valor's hull, wood splintering in a shower of debris. A mast groaned, leaned, then toppled like a fallen titan. The ship listed hard, sailors spilling across the deck in confusion. Dorian laughed. Not a chuckle, not a man's laugh, but something wild, something born of freedom and fury. The sound carried across the water like a battle cry. On the quarterdeck, his first mate, a wiry Spaniard named Valor, leaned into the wheel with him. "She's sinking, Captain," he shouted, his long braids snapping in the wind. "The Valor will be ash before dawn." "Aye," Dorian growled, eyes gleaming. "But not before we take what's ours." He turned, sweeping the deck with his cutlass raised. "Boarding parties! Grapples! With me!" The crew roared in unison, a cacophony of savages, deserters, and vagabonds who had sworn their lives to the black flag. Grappling hooks flew across the gap, biting into the Valor's rails. Planks slammed out, and like wolves unleashed, the pirates surged across. Dorian was the first to leap. He landed hard, boots thudding on burning timbers. His cutlass slashed through the first naval officer to stand in his way, cleaving him down in a shower of sparks and blood. Another lunged with a pike. Dorian caught the shaft, snapped it across his knee, and drove the jagged end into the man's throat. The Valor shuddered as more cannon fire ripped her apart. Smoke and flame curled upward, painting the stars in hell's own colours. Steel rang on steel as the decks became a slaughterhouse. Pirates and navy men clashed in brutal melee. Pistols cracked, blades sparked, men screamed and fell. Black, the voice came from above. Dorian glanced up through the haze. There, on the high stern castle of the Valor, stood Commodore Nathaniel Harrow, a man of polished steel and noble arrogance. His white uniform gleamed even in the smoke, his sword flashing in the firelight. "You will hang for this," Harrow thundered, pointing his blade down at Dorian. "By order of the crown." Dorian grinned, blood dripping from his cutlass. "You'll have to catch me first, Nathaniel." With a roar, he barreled through the chaos, cutting a path of red across the deck. His men followed in his wake, howling like demons. Harrow descended the steps, flanked by marines with muskets at the ready. "Fire!" he barked. The volley cracked, smoke filling the air. 3 pirates fell, screaming. One ball grazed Dorian's shoulder, tearing his coat and burning like fire against his flesh. He didn't falter. He slammed into the line of marines, cutlass cleaving through powder-smoked steel. A pistol came up. Dorian snatched it, spun, and fired point-blank into a soldier's chest. The man crumpled. Another lunged with a bayonet. Dorian twisted aside, caught the barrel, and drove the man backward into the flames. Harrow himself came forward, sword gleaming. The Commodore moved with the grace of a duelist, blade flicking with deadly precision. Their weapons clashed, sparks flying. "Still hiding behind the king's skirts, Harrow?" Dorian taunted, pressing forward. "Still wallowing in filth and treachery, Black?" Harrow snarled back, his blade darting. He lunged for Dorian's throat. But Dorian was faster. He caught the strike, twisted, and slammed his forehead into Harrow's face. Bone crunched. Blood burst from the Commodore's nose. Harrow staggered back, cursing. But his blade whipped up again, relentless. The duel raged amid chaos, fire, and screams. Every clash of steel echoed across the sea. Pirates and marines fought around them, but none dared interrupt their captains. Dorian's blade lashed out, scoring Harrow's arm. The Commodore hissed, blood staining his perfect uniform. He retaliated with a savage slash that nearly took Dorian's ear. Then the Valor groaned like a dying beast. Her hull split with a thunderous crack. Seawater poured in, hissing against the flames. The deck tilted sharply, bodies sliding into the inferno. "She's going under!" someone screamed. Dorian gritted his teeth, cutlass locked with Harrow's. Smoke stung his lungs. Flames licked higher. The sea itself seemed to roar for blood. And in that moment, he shoved Harrow back, spat in the Commodore's face, and bellowed, "This is the fate of kings, Nathaniel. All crowns burn." He kicked the man hard in the chest. Harrow toppled backward, crashing through the railing. His scream was swallowed by the sea below. The Commodore was gone. "Back to the Eclipse! All hands!" Dorian roared, waving his men toward the grapples. Pirates scrambled, dragging loot, powder, and gold across the planks. Flames consumed the Valor in a roaring crescendo, her guns booming one last time as powder stores ignited. The explosion split the night in two, a column of fire and smoke rising like the wrath of gods. The shockwaves slammed the Eclipse, throwing men to the deck. Dorian gripped the railing, teeth bared as the heat washed over him. The Valor split, her broken hull sinking into the abyss. When the smoke cleared, only wreckage and corpses floated where the proud galleon had stood. The pirates cheered, raising swords, pistols, and stolen treasure to the sky. The black flag snapped proudly above them, and Captain Dorian Black, standing at the helm once more, grinned into the burning horizon. "Mark my words, lads," he called, his voice carrying over the waves. "This night the world remembers our name. We are death to empires, thieves of kings, and lords of the sea. We are the crimson horizon, The roar of his crew thundered like cannon fire, echoing across the endless dark. And thus began the legend. Chapter 2. The Devil's Wind. The dawn after battle was always quieter than death. The Eclipse cut through the morning fog, her sails patched, her deck littered with wounded men and salvaged plunder. Blood still stained the planks, though the crew sang as they worked, voices raw and triumphant. Dorian leaned on the rail, watching gulls circle over the wreckage they'd left behind. He smelled salt, smoke, and victory, but in his bones he felt the storm coming. They rejoined him, arms crossed. "The men are drunk on glory," he said, his Spanish accent rolling. "But you know the crown will not let this pass, Captain. They'll send fleets." "Hunters," Dorian smirked, rolling a gold coin between his fingers. "Let them come. The sea belongs to no king." Valor glanced at him. "And if they bring their best, Harrow will not be the last." Dorian's eye gleamed. "Then we carve our names deeper. Every empire has its grave. Ours will be made of fire." As if summoned by fate, the wind shifted. A sudden gale howled through the sails, violent and cold. Clouds rolled black over the horizon, moving faster than nature should allow. The crew fell silent, staring at the sky. One of the older sailors, a one-eyed deckhand named Briggs, muttered a prayer. "The devil's wind," he rasped. "No storm moves so quick without hell's hand behind it." Lightning split the sky, thunder cracking like cannon fire. The sea rose in swells that tossed the Eclipse like a toy. "Storm anchors," Dorian barked, snapping his cutlass toward the deck. "Reef the sails. Move!" Men scrambled, ropes whipping, sails snapping like thunder. Rain lashed down in sheets. Waves towered, crashing over the rails. Dorian gripped the helm with Valor, muscles straining against the furious sea. The ship groaned, shuddering with each swell. Lightning painted the world in white, thunder shaking the bones of every man aboard. And through the storm, a shape appeared. A ship. No, a phantom. She cut through the waves like a ghost, sails black as night, her figurehead a snarling demon. No crew lined her deck. No voices carried on the wind, yet she moved with purpose, directly toward them. The crew cried out, fear plain in their eyes. "By the gods," Briggs whispered, "the marauder's Wraith. She's real." Dorian narrowed his eye, rain streaming down his face. "Nothing's real till I've killed it," he growled. The phantom ship loomed closer, lightning flashing across her skeletal rigging. Her cannons glowed with eerie fire. And then she fired. The ghost cannons didn't boom, they screamed. A sound like torn metal and drowning men ripped across the water. The Eclipse shuddered as the first volley smacked into her hull in cold bursts of light. Not splinters and flame, but frost that spidered out from the impact and bit into the wood like a living thing. "By every cursed saint," Briggs croaked, clutching a rail rimed with ice. "It's grave fire." "I was handsome once," Wraith said mildly, and moved. He was fast, inhumanly so. The first flurry nearly took Dorian's throat, heart and eye. Only a savage step in and a shoulder check saved him, and even then the black blade nicked his jaw and left a numbness that crawled. Dorian answered with power. 2 heavy chops, a feint, a headbutt. Wraith flowed away, leaving after images. His coat whispered like sails. The compass at his throat spun and stilled, each stillness making the storm buck like a spooked horse. "What's that bauble?" Dorian grunted, circling. "Leash for the wind." "Key to the cellar," Wraith murmured, "where storms are kept." His blade flicked. Dorian parried. The shock ran up his arm and made his elbow ache. "You broke a king's toy last night, mortal. The sea loves a thief. That's why she sends me to take you." Dorian laughed short, hard. "The sea loves no one. She lets us walk on her spine for a while and calls it mercy. He lunged, faint, riposte. His blade kissed Wraith's ribs and tore fog that smelled of tar and old fear. The phantom hissed. Something in Dorian thrilled. This wasn't cannon against cannon or trick against trick. This was blade to blade, will to will, his favourite kind of truth. Wraith's next strike was not for flesh, but for memory. Dorian felt it hit like a wave through bone. He smelled oranges on a pier. He saw a girl with a green scarf run laughing. He heard himself promise, "I'll come back." Then the wave pulled, and the scarf and the girl and the oranges were gone, and a white blankness tried to fill that space. "Best not," Dorian said, quiet, almost gentle. He drove the cutlass forward, 2 hands, like he was nailing a lid shut. The blade plunged through Wraith's chest. The phantom didn't bleed. He rang, the note climbing out of human hearing. The compass at his throat spun like mad, then locked on Dorian again. Wraith smiled with ruin for a mouth. "You'll do." His free hand came up gloved, skeletal beneath, and snatched Dorian's wrist. In that instant, Dorian felt himself falling not off the deck, not into water, but into a place where there were no decks, no water, only dark and weight, and a cold so absolute it had numbers. "Captain!" Veyra's voice, distant as shore. Dorian did the only thing he could. He let go of his cutlass and punched Wraith in the jaw. The phantom's head snapped back with surprising solid resistance. The compass chain jerked taut. Dorian's other hand grip, slick with rain, closed on it. He tore. The chain snapped. The compass cage cut his palm. He fell backward, compass clutched tight, as Wraith staggered and became just for a heartbeat less than a captain, and more a tangle of wrong shapes trying to be a man. The world slammed back. Sound hit, rain hit, deck under boots. Dorian rolled, came up, and the compass heavy, cold as a coin in winter, spun in its iron cage, then settled, needle pointing not north but somewhere under. The storm hiccuped, as if a drunk had lost a step. Wraith screamed, not the scream of cannons, not the scream of storm, a man's scream, raw and insulted. The Wraith's crew writhed, flickering. "Back to the Eclipse!" Dorian bellowed. "Now!" Veyra grabbed Mud Briggs Morel, hauled. Dorian flung a line and swung as phantom blades snapped at his boots. He hit his own deck in a skid, rolled up, and shoved the compass into Veyra's hands. "Don't let it touch the sea." "Aye." Veyra clutched it away from the rail, like it was a newborn and hell's mouth. The Wraith surged, seeking them, but she was suddenly less sure, as if the current had turned against her. The Eclipse's crew, smelling weakness like sharks, found their courage. Salted grapeshot took phantoms off the rail in shredding blasts. Axes finally bit through the dead chains. The gap widened, then widened more, as the Eclipse found wind, a warm wind, slipping like a friend into her sails. "Helm to starboard!" Dorian roared, hauling. "Give me that sliver of breeze, by God take it." The Eclipse obeyed. She leapt like a mare under a good rider. Water boiled from her bow. The Wraith clawed after, screaming cannons ripping the air, but range lengthened, and grave fire bursts struck the sea astern, hissing uselessly. Lightning strobed. The storm muttered like a king denied. And then, with a sulky sigh, the devil's wind eased. Rain thinned. The black shelf of cloud trailed away, hunting some other sinner. The ocean's colour crept back, green and iron and living. On deck, men slumped where they stood. Then the sound rose. First one, then a dozen, then all a cheer from throats that tasted salt and didn't mind. Hats flew up, weapons banged rails. Morel whooped and clapped Briggs on the back, hard enough to dislodge a lung. Dorian didn't cheer. He stood at the stern and watched the line where the storm retreated, eyes narrowed. The Wraith still hovered in that grey world, pacing, distorted by distance and wrongness. Wraith stood on his quarterdeck and watched back. His head cocked. He lifted a hand, palm up, empty where the compass had been. Then he closed his fist and brought it down like a judge. The Wraith dwindled, fog folding around her, until there was nothing in that part of the world but the memory of cold. Vera came to Dorian with the compass swaddled in sailcloth. "I don't like it," he said. Dorian took it. The iron cage bit his palm again. He ignored it, up close. The thing was older than sense, carved with lines that weren't letters, but made his eye try to read anyway. The needle quivered, like something alive, sniffing for blood. "I like that Wraith liked it," Dorian said. "He wanted it. That means it hurts him not to have it. It could hurt us too. It already has." Dorian flexed his fingers. The cut in his palm had scabbed black. "Question is whether the knife is better in our hand." Vera grimaced. "You are the only man I know who steals a curse and calls it a tool." "I'm the only man you know who keeps breathing," Dorian said lightly, and tucked the compass into the inside pocket of his coat. Chapter 3. The Stormglass Key. They limped through the next day with jury-rigged lines and patched sails. Every creak of the hull sounded wrong, because the grave cold had touched the timbers and left a brittle memory there. The carpenter, Hob, threatened to marry the ship just so he could nag her properly. Men laughed too loud and too often, working off the last of their fear with jokes. At noon, the sun pushed through enough to throw coins on the water. Dorian climbed the ratlines to the cross trees and watched the world. He always did that when things got ugly. It reminded him that ugly could look small from high enough. Mirelle joined him, spider quick. "You don't trust that thing out of your sight," she said, nodding at his coat. "I don't trust anything out of my sight," Dorian said. "Least of all this crew." He flashed her a grin to take the sting out. "Fair." She leaned out, eyes half-lidded against the glare. "So what's the plan, Captain?" "We need a place to lick our wounds and count our spoils," Dorian said. "And I need a mind that knows what this compass is for. I've seen trinkets, I've stolen reliquaries. This is neither. This is a lockpick for somewhere no sane man keeps a lock. Which means you know a madwoman who can read it." "Of course." He slid down a few feet, then paused. "You ever met Mother Gallows?" Mirelle blinked. "That hag at rope, End K, who tattoos sharks like they're sailors?" "The very same. She was a corsair augur before the crown cut the cords out of her throat. Taught herself to speak with a knife and a deck of teeth." He grinned. "She likes me. She likes your gold." "She likes my manners," Dorian said, already descending. "We'll see if she likes our odds." They bent course 3 points east, then another south by easterly. By dusk, the horizon threw up a low, ugly silhouette. Rope End K. A knot of rocks and tide pools with a shanty settlement clinging to the lee-like barnacles on a whale. Lanterns burned in nets strung between poles. The jetties were made of ship ribs. A gallows stood on the highest rock, no noose on it, only a wreath of shells. It made the place look festive and haunted all at once. They dropped anchor in the bight where the water went calm and suspicious. Dorian took Vera, Mirelle, Briggs, and 2 others ashore in the longboat. Every man carried steel doused in salt. Every man smelled the place's particular perfume: tar, fish, rum, and the sweet stink of things pulled out of the sea that had been down too long. Children watched from the rocks with the speculative glares of cats. Women in shawls braided with fishbone nodded once, and then pretended not to see. A fiddler played something cheerful and mean. It was a good port for bad men. Mother Gallows kept a shack near the gallows. It was neat, which was almost shocking. Nets coiled like script. Knives hung from pegs you could have used to lay out a map. Strings of shark teeth clicked in the wind like prayer beads. A black kettle hissed over a stove. The woman herself sat on a 3-legged stool, old as driftwood and twice as hard. A puckered scar lay where a throat should have been. A brass whistle dangled there instead. Her eyes were impossible to fool. Dorian took off his hat. "Mother." She lifted 2 fingers in greeting, then flicked them in a quick pattern. Her hands were as eloquent as a priest's. "You brought me trouble. When have I brought anything else?" Dorian unslung the compass and held it up without stepping closer than he had to. "Do you know this toy?" Her face changed. Not much, a tightening around the eyes, a small retreat of the chin. She didn't reach. She made a sign against ill luck that wasn't any religion Dorian knew. Then she took the brass whistle from her neck, put it between teeth, and blew. The tone was too high to hear. Or maybe it was perfectly audible, but too true for humans to call sound. D. A swirl of black and white, with a single blue spark at its centre that winked like an eye, trying not to sleep. The chamber seemed to lean. Morel slammed the box lid. The hum cut off so abruptly, Dorian nearly dropped the sphere. The world steadied, but only a little. Somewhere, great water took a new breath. From behind them, beyond the cleft, out over the moor, a scream rose. Not ghost cannons, not wind. A long, hungry sound that had waited 1,000 years for the table to be set. Wraith's voice followed, faint and delighted, like a toast raised in a storm. "Come along then, thief!" Dorian tucked the storm heart under his coat and smiled with too many teeth. "Back to the boat," he said, and his voice was very calm. "The legend started last night. Tonight we make sure it doesn't end."